Shalom. And we shall continue to allow for the Spirit to lead and guide us into all truth. We understand and know that that word is truth. We understand that Yeshua is the word made manifest flesh. And the word came and dwelt among us. The word came and dwelt among us. I pray that he is dwelling within you. Shalom. And we are in Hebrews, and we shall continue. Hebrews chapter 8. And what have we learned thus far? We learned that our forefathers died, fell dead in the wilderness because of unbelief, because of lack of trust. Without trust, it is impossible to please him. We understand that the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, will lead and guide you into all truth. We understand that his word is truth. We understand that Yeshua himself is like the high priest, right? That we can come boldly before the throne of grace and find mercy and grace and help in the time of need. That he is a high priest like no other, because he himself does not have to offer sacrifices for his own sin and ours, but he himself, blameless, became the sacrifice. And he does not die, he lives forever. And yet he's the word made flesh. He's the word made flesh. And this is why we understand that the word should never pass away. Not a single yoke. Hebrews chapter 8, verse 1. Here, Hebrews chapter 8, verse 1. Here's the whole point of what we've been saying. Here's the whole point of what we've been saying. Right? We do have just such a high priest as has been described. And he does sit at the right hand of the Father in heaven. There he serves in the holy place. That is, in the true tent of meeting. The one erected not by human hands, but by the hand of Elohim. For every high priest is appointed to offer both gifts and sacrifices. So this high priest too has to have something that he can offer. Right? Now, if he were here on earth, he wouldn't be priest at all, since there already are priests offering here on earth gifts required by the Torah, that is the Levites, right? But what they are serving is only a copy and shadow of the heavenly original. For when Moshe was about to erect the tent, Elohim warned him, "See to it that you make everything according to the pattern which you were shown on the mountain." So what we got to understand is that Moshe came down with this pattern, right? The tabernacle, right? Now he was instructed to, from Exodus 25, right? He was instructed to make sure he come down off the mountain and he create a tent of meeting here on earth, exactly like the pattern that he had saw when he was on the mountain. So when he was on the mountain, he had things revealed to him, what he saw. So he came down and made a pattern of what he saw. And this is why it's written a shadow of what's to come. Because he saw what's to come, which already was, or which already is. Those who have ears, hear. But what they are serving is only a copy and a shadow of the heavenly original, right? For when Moses was about to erect the tent, Elohim warned him, "See to it that you make everything according to the pattern you were shown here on earth, on the mountain." Verse 6, chapter 8, Hebrews. But now the work Yeshua has been given to do is far superior to theirs, just as the covenant he mediates is better. Hallelujah. For this covenant has been given as Torah on the basis of better promises. This Torah, this covenant has been given as Torah on the basis of better promises. Indeed, if the first covenant had not given ground for fault finding, there would have been no need for a second one, right? For Elohim does find fault with the people when he says, see, the days are coming, says Yah, when I will establish over the house of Israel and of the house of Judah a new covenant. Hallelujah. Of course, this is Jeremiah 30:31. It would not be like the covenant which I made with their forefathers on the day when I took them by the hand and led them forth out of the land of Egypt, because they for their part did not remain faithful to my covenant. So I for my part stopped concerning myself with them, says Yah. For this is the covenant which I will make with the house of Israel after those days, says Yah. I will put my Torah in their minds and write it on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they will be my people. None of them will teach his fellow citizens or his brother, saying, know Yah, for all will know me, from the least of them to the greatest, because I will be merciful toward their wickedness, and remember their sins no more. Verse 13, chapter 8. By using the term new, if you want to think about the book of Hebrews, it's such a teacher. Please read it for yourself. It's such a teacher. It's not like the other letters, where it's like you can tell it's a letter. It's a letter that opens up, it's I, Paul, from this place with greetings and thanksgiving, and greet you with all my prayers and shalom, me and Timothy, me and it's not a letter. It's not written like the other epistles. Rather, this is actually such a teaching mechanism to us Hebrews, us Messianic, right, who are part of the new covenant. And he starts and breaks down the need for the high priest, and breaks down the actual high priest that's in effect now, and breaks down the reason why there is a day of rest that we are trying to attain to, and how we will not enter into that place of rest is because of unbelief, because of lack of trust. And we must have trust. And what are we trusting in? We're trusting in the Messiah, Yeshua, who is the great high priest, and his sacrifices and what he has done by his obedience unto death through suffering allows us to be partakers of what? Partakers of this covenant, the new covenant, which is already prophesied about in Jeremiah 31:31. But of course, it is highlighted again right here in Hebrews, which is the book that you can just refer to as the teacher. Verse 13, chapter 8. By using the term new, he has made the first covenant old. And something being made old, something in the process of aging, is on its way to vanishing altogether. Some don't like to hear that. Some don't like to hear that. By him referring to the covenant that Yeshua has established and recalling it new, of course, he automatically called the one from before old. And if something is old, it is like almost on its way out. Chapter 9, verse 1. Now the first covenant had both regulations for worship and a holy place here on earth. A tent was set up, the outer one, which was called the holy place. In it were the menorah, the table, and the bread of the presence. Behind the second partition was a tent called the holiest place, the holiest of holies we know it as, right? Which had the golden altar for burning incense, and the ark of the covenant entirely covered with gold. In the ark was the gold jar containing the manna, Aaron's rod that sprouted and budded, and the stone tablets of the covenant, where the 10 was written. Above it were the cherubim representing the glory, casting their shadow on the lid of the ark. That's a lot right there. Okay, Father. But now is not the time to discuss these things in detail. I'm so sorry. Like, I didn't know the next sentence was there, and I had to pause for a second, and he just told me what was actually written. See, the Spirit leading guides you into the truth. The Ruach just was like, hey, no, son, not at the time. And then I just kept reading the word, and the word said, but now was not the time to discuss these things in detail. Of course, the ark and the ark being covered with gold, and the 2 cherubims, and the manna, and the 2 tablets, and the cherubim shadow casting. That's a lot. But now not the time to discuss those in detail. We shall continue Hebrews. Hallelujah. With things so arranged, verse 6, chapter 9. With things so arranged, the priests go into the outer tent at the time to discharge their duties, but only the high priest enters the inner one, and he goes in once a year, and he must always bring blood, because the blood speaks. We know this from Abel, right? He said, Cain, what you doing? Where you at, man? Like, no, what you do to your brother? Your brother's blood is speaking to me from the ground. So we know way in the beginning, in Bereshit, in Genesis, right? We know in the first few chapters of Genesis what? That the blood speaks. This is why blood, the sprinkling of the blood, the covering of the blood. See, the blood itself speaks. This is why the lamb, holy. This is why the lamb that had to be sacrificed, holy. The blood speaks. The blood speaks. My blood speaks. Your blood speaks. It speaks. Okay? The blood speaks. Verse 6, chapter 9, Hebrews. With things so arranged that the priests go into the outer tent all the time to discharge their duties, but only the high priest enters into the inner one, and he goes in only once a year, and he must always bring blood, which he offers both for himself and for the sins committed in ignorance by the people. By this arrangement, the Ruach HaKodesh showed that so long as the first tent had standing, the way into the holiest place was still closed. This symbolizes the present age and indicates that the conscience of the person performing the service cannot be brought to the goal by the gifts and the sacrifices he offers, for they involve only food and drink and various ceremonial washings, regulations concerning the outward life imposed into the time of Elohim to reshape the whole structure. Right? And this is why he speaks about it in Matthew 23. You look like whitewashed tombs, but look fine on the outside, but inside are full of dead man bones, because that's the thing that they were focused on. They were focused on the outer appearance, and this old covenant really focused on the outer appearance. This is why they had to wash, and this is why they had to dress a certain way, and wash a certain way, and sprinkle blood upon themselves, and all these things dealt with the outside, but there was still that thing on the inside, sin. But these things were a shadow of things to come. These things had to be put forth. So what was to come, which was greater, what was greater is what dealt on the inside, not the outside. Verse 11. But when the Messiah appeared as high priest of good things that are happening already, then through the greater and more perfect tent, which is not man-made, that is not to be created by this world, he entered into the holiest place once and for all. He entered into the holiest place once and for all. He entered into the holiest place once and for all. And he entered not by means of blood. And he entered not by means of blood of goats and calves, but by means of his own blood. He entered in not by means of blood of goats and cows, but he entered in by means of his own blood, thus setting people free forever. For if sprinkling ceremonial unclean persons with blood of goats and bulls and asses of a heifer restored the outward purity, then how much more the blood of the Messiah, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself to Elohim as a sacrifice without blemish, will purify our conscience from works that lead to death, so that we can serve the living God. It is because of this death that he is the mediator of a new covenant or a new will, because a death has occurred which sets people free from the transgressions committed under the first covenant. Those who have been called may receive the promised eternal inheritance. For where there is a will, there must necessarily be produced evidence of its maker's death. Where there's a will, there gotta be presented evidence of its maker's death. If there's a will and you're about to get some inheritance, somebody gotta produce a death certificate. Alright? Since a will goes into effect only upon death, it never has force while the maker is still alive. Do you see that? Did you hear that? That all these things were a shadow. And these things couldn't truly be enforced eternally until the one who created it died. Those who have ears, hear. Verse 18, chapter 9. This is why the first covenant too was inaugurated with blood. After Moshe had proclaimed every command of the Torah to all people, he took the blood of the calves with some water and used scarlet wool and hyssop to sprinkle both the scroll itself and the people. And he said, this is the blood of the covenant which Elohim has ordained for you. Likewise, he sprinkled with the blood both the tent and all the things used in its ceremonies. In fact, according to the Torah, almost everything is purified with blood. 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 Man, that's a lot. Pray on that. Ask for that revelation, right? Everything is purified with blood. Likewise, he sprinkled the blood of both the tent and all the things used in its ceremonies. In fact, according to the Torah, almost everything is purified with blood. Indeed, without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness of sins. Now, this is how the copies of... Verse 23. Now, this is how the copies of the heavenly things had to be purified. The copies of the heavenly things had to be purified. So what Moses saw when he was up on the mount, he came down and he made copies here on earth. But even the copies had to be purified. But these things on earth that had to be purified with blood of a so-called pure animal. Now this is how the copies of the heavenly things had to be purified. But the heavenly things themselves require better sacrifices than these. Right? So now, since he came down, made copies of things in the heavenlies, here on earth, he came down and made copies on earth of the things in the heavenlies, and the things here on earth had to take blood of things here on earth so that can be purified. But now we're dealing with the things in the heavenly, which are the things in the spiritual, which are the things in the eternal. How do we make those things pure? Now this is how the copies of the heavenly things had to be purified. But the heavenly things themselves require better sacrifices than these. For the Messiah has entered a holy place which is not man-made and merely a copy of the true one, but into heaven itself. He came into the holies of holies, which is not man-made and which is not no copy, but into heaven itself, in order to appear now on our behalf in the very presence of Elohim. Further, he did not enter heaven to offer himself over and over again, like the high priest who enters the holiest place year after year with blood that is not of his own. For then he would have to suffer death many times from the founding of the universe on. But as it is, he has appeared once at the end of the age in order to do away with sin through the sacrifice of himself, just as human beings have to die once. But after this comes the judgment. So also the Messiah, having been offered once to bear the sins of many, will appear a second time, not to deal with sin, but to deliver those who are eagerly awaiting for him. Judgment. Just as we die, then we get judged. We die once, then get judged. The Messiah died. And there, he is there eagerly waiting to judge. Hebrews is the book that you must pray through, that you must ask the Ruach HaKodesh to lead you and guide you into the revelations of these teachings. but it's all in the written word. See, these things are profoundly simple, but coming from a complex nature. And the reason why it can be complex only because of a veil. So pray that the eyes of your understanding be enlightened as you eat meat. It's time to stop drinking milk, and it's time to eat meat. You want to take that first bite? Grab a book of Hebrews. Take a bite of the meat. See if you can digest it. Shalom. There's more to come.